Hello and welcome back to Silver Age, Silver Screen, the podcast where we watch, discuss, and review sci-fi, cult, superhero, and other stereotypically geeky works. I'm your co-host, Casey Jarms.
And I'm your other co-host, Riley Thorpe. And Casey, I have a question for you. Have you ever just been lying in bed late at night and just thought to yourself, God damn it, my genetics are such a fucking asshole?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, good for you, because there's an entire song in this movie devoted to that, sang by one of the girls from Spy Kids.
I mean, to be fair, my genetics would be ugly rather than rare blood disease that causes me to die if I go outside, but I can relate.
Yeah, I mean, you do the Spy Kids movies, and it's like, where else do you go from there?
How about into this massive flop of a musical that was directed by the guy who directed Saw, and I don't know how to describe this thing. We're talking about Repo, the genetic opera. Gotta say, Repo, because there's an exclamation mark in the title.
Yeah, it's great. It's pure cinema at its finest. Martin Scorsese would be absolutely proud. And he would be very proud of the fact that a good friend of his, Paul Sorvino, is in this film. Paul Sorvino from Goodfellas. I knew nothing about this movie going into it. I try to do that when it comes to cult classics, because I really want to just go into it completely blind so that I can feel the entire experience within myself. However, what I've found is that on occasion, that can sometimes feel like sticking your dick into a glory hole and not knowing what's on the other side, whether it's a human or, a horse. But the point is, it can be really fucking bad. Okay, and I apologize for the really gross metaphor. Casey's probably throwing up right now, but...
No, I'm just staring at the phone with my mouth open. What can we even say about this film? It's an opera, okay? The whole film's an opera. Like, every word of this film is sung. Like, the whole thing's a big musical number. It's this sci-fi dystopian black comedy family drama. It's a film that stars Giles from Buffy, the girl from Spy Kids, and Paris Hilton. It's a film that is like nothing else I've ever seen. And I can't tell if it's the greatest thing I've ever seen or the worst.
And at the end of the day, that's all we need to know for a cult classic. But it is interesting. This is the second musical we've covered on this show. Like, neither of us are real big musical fans. Not to say that they don't have an art in and of themselves and they're important to cinema. No, absolutely, they are. It's just we're not personally fans of that. But the first one we watched was about a man-eating plant directed by Miss Piggy. And this one is this one. I don't know. Like, God, it's crazy. It is balls to the wall insanity. And sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. Yeah. Casey and I had a good long discussion about that before the podcast. Like, we don't even know what to say.
So, the film, it opens up with this comic book narration. Like, all the flashback scenes are in comic book form, which is a good stylistic thing. And also totally isn't because the film had no budget to film those scenes.
Yeah,
it had $8.5 million budget. I'm pretty sure I read that Paris Hilton had to donate money to keep the production afloat. But hey, it made so much money back. A whole 200,000, give or take a bit.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing that I found is, obviously, like I said, I went into this movie knowing nothing, and I just was floored by the amount of stars that were, stars, air quotes, like Paul Sorvino, Paris Hilton, Alexa Panavega, others, but it's like, one thing that I did find very interesting was that Paris Hilton, of all people, she was like, all in on this movie. Like, she campaigned and lobbied to be in this. Like, the director who directed half the Saw movies, even the most recent.
Side note, a second ago I said he directed Saw. Just double check, that's incorrect. He directed the crappy sequels to Saw.
Yeah, I think he did like 2, 3, 4.
And he's gonna do Spiral.
Spiral already came out.
Well, he's going to do it again once the timeline resets.
Yeah. So Paris Hilton, the director told her agent that he did not want to audition her. He did not want her for this movie. Despite that, she showed up to the audition anyway, and apparently she killed it as much as Paris Hilton, an untalented person, can kill a singing and acting audition. She really wanted to be a part of this, even going so far as to make appearances at nightclubs and taking all the money she got from that and funding this movie. She donated funds out of her own pocket to support the production design and the wardrobe departments. She really wanted to be a part of this movie. And surprisingly enough, Paris Hilton's terrible, in general, but she's not that bad in this movie, I don't think.
She's pretty good. I mean, it helps that she's playing a wealthy heiress with a drug addiction problem, which may or may not be something that the actress can relate to. But yeah, she does pretty good.
I love that. She's good in the scenes that she's in. She's not in it very much, but she's still there. And she has a couple singing numbers, which is interesting because she is a terrible singer. She has a song called Drunk Text that radio host Howard Stern tore apart for 45 minutes.
Although, to be fair, it works because the character she's playing can't fucking sing and at one point gets booed off stage.
Yeah, very true.
Enough about Paris Hilton. She's not even that major of a character. Let's talk about what this film is about. It takes place in the future. After there's been this horrific pandemic. Oh, that's fun. That causes massive organ failure in everyone. But don't worry, we have a savior! Gene Co., a megacorp that gives organ transplants. And also, they're really expensive. And you know how, when you buy a car or a house or something, and you can't pay off the mortgage on it, the bank repossesses it? They, send repo men to take it? Well, that exists in this movie, but for internal organs. Yeah, the film is about a man whose job is to kill people and take their organs back if they cannot pay their bills.
Gotta love cinema. Man, again, Martin Scorsese would be proud, especially since he most definitely saw this movie, which I think is the thought of that is hilarious. Gene Co. was founded by Roddy Largo, who's a criminal mob boss turned CEO, and his 3 children, Luigi, Amber Sweet, and Pavi. And together they all just run this evil megacorp that is responsible for killing people and just essentially running this entire dystopian city that, for all we know, this is all that exists.
Yeah. Can we talk about these awful, awful children?
Yes.
We've already briefly mentioned Paris Hilton's in this as a woman who is addicted to getting plastic surgery on her face and also on painkillers because surgeries. She is joined by her brother Luigi, who is just really fucking angry all the time and murders people. There are 4 different scenes in this movie where he gets pissed off and just pulls out a knife and starts stabbing an extra to death. And then there's Pavi.
Oh yeah. Pavi is addicted to stealing people's faces. Literally, he kills them, cuts off their face, and wears it over his own. And I feel like that was a reference to the classic French silent film Eyes Without a Face, which has similarly been referenced to in many other films, most recently a film called Veronica, which I have not seen, but I've seen clips of, and good God, is that movie horrible. But we're not talking about Veronica, though we most definitely should in the near future. We are talking about Repo, the genetic opera. And Pavi wears people's faces.
Yeah, like, I don't know this French film Riley's talking about, or was it French?
Yeah, it's
I don't pay attention to what you say.
Yeah, thanks, podcast host. Yeah, it's a film where at one scene, someone, like, they show on camera there's a surgery where someone has their face removed, and they show it.
He reminds me of the new 52 Joker. Like, remember when that was a thing for a while, where the Joker cut off his face but wore it as a mask? That was dumb.
Yeah, it was fucked up, but it was dumb.
Yeah, and these wonderful, horrible people are a comic relief in this dark, dark, black comedy movie. The film starts off properly by introducing us to Shiloh, played by Alexa Vega, this sick teenage girl who sneaks out of her house and goes to her mother's graveyard, and while she's there, she runs into the grave robber, a drug dealer who extracts painkillers from the recently deceased's bloodstream so he can sell them. And the cops show up to arrest him, and Shiloh, Vega's character, gets in trouble when the Repo Man shows up, and she faints, and like the Repo Man takes her and brings her home to her gothic mansion where she lives with her mysterious father.
Yeah, and there's a lot, I mean a lot, of CGI and exposition in these scenes. Like, there's a shot where it's panning over the entire city, or it's a shot of the entire city, and we get to Gene Co, where Roddy Largo, the founder and CEO of Gene Co, finds that he has a terminal illness, and there's no cure, no matter how many organs he transplants. And from there, we immediately cut to a teenage girl who meets a really sketchy guy in the middle of a graveyard and finds a bunch of dead bodies just lying there, being dumped into a giant pit next to a graveyard. And she has no idea. She has no idea that any of this is going on.
Yeah, because she's sheltered. Because, as we find out in a backstory flashback, there's a lot of backstory flashbacks, which, like we said, are comics. Shiloh's mother had a rare blood disease and died during childbirth. And because Shiloh has the same disease, her father doesn't let her go outside. Just locks her in her room all the time. And also, as soon as we find this out, we find out that her father accidentally killed her mother while trying to cure her of the blood disease. Ew. And we find out that her father, Nathan, who she thinks is a doctor, is actually the Repo Man.
Dun, dun, dun! All of this is being sung, by the way, just so you know. The soundtrack is on Spotify. I've been listening to it all day. Yeah, again, a lot of exposition, a lot of singing, a lot of CGI. Those are our protagonists, our antagonists, and it's a great first act. It gets you a lot of information. A lot. And I mean a lot. There's a shit ton of world building. Throughout the movie, I had to keep pausing it just to write stuff down. Because there's just so much thrown at you. I'd also like to point out something that I didn't point out earlier. I watched most of this movie with my mother.
Why?
Yeah, I don't know, she wanted to watch it with me. And she hated it, obviously. And she asked me the next day, she was like, "What did you think of the movie last night?" And I go, "Honestly, I still don't know." And I still don't know. It's been like 3 days. But we learn in these comic book flashbacks that her father saved her life, but in doing so, tried to save her mother, but in doing so killed her. And then we get that exact same information in a filmed flashback and in dialogue. And that happens a lot in this movie. That's one of my big problems, is they show us, when it comes to making a movie, it's better to show rather than to tell, generally.
And it's especially worse to show and then tell and then show again.
Yeah, that happens all throughout the movie. They show you what happened, but then the next scene will be an entire song number about what happened, repeating the exact same information over again. And it's lazy script writing. But at the end of the day, the writing for me isn't necessarily the biggest problem. For me, the editing was atrocious in this film. I get that they're trying to go for this like over the top, obnoxious, off-putting style when it comes to the editing, like a rock music video, because that's essentially what this is. But at the end of the day, it was so choppy and so shitty that I was getting a migraine watching it. Like, what the fuck? Like, at one point, there's a scene where they're outside, and then it cuts to this group of opera singers who are like singing in the background. Like, where the fuck did they come from? The point of what I'm trying to say is the writing and editing are shitty. Really bad, especially the editing.
Shortly after we find out that Nathan, Shiloh's father, blames himself for the death of Shiloh's mother, we get another flashback, this time from Roddy, our evil business lord, who reveals that actually he murdered Shiloh's mother by, like, swapping out the cure for poison, because Shiloh's mother, Marnie, used to date him but left him for Nathan, and he blackmailed Nathan into working for him as the serial killer Repo Man.
Mm-hmm. And they invited Roddy to their wedding, because that's what you do to a homicidal CEO.
Actually, yeah, now that you point that out, what the fuck was that, Marnie and Nathan? Like, oh, I'm leaving my fiancé for you. Let's invite him to the wedding.
Jesus Christ. Again, storytelling.
So let's talk about Nathan as a character. He seems to have a bit of a split personality. He has two modes. Loving, overprotective father who's like, make sure to take your medicine, honey. I love you. Don't go outside because people will hurt you. And then the Repo Man, who is just this violent, brutal assassin who seems to delight in the bloodshed he causes. Like, at one point in the movie, he, like, rips out someone's heart that just sticks his hand up the guy's body and plays him like a puppet and sings along. By the way, this movie, it's very gory at points.
Oh, yeah. In case you didn't know, there's a scene where he cuts out a guy's spinal cord while he's having a loving and caring conversation with his daughter, saying he's going to return home, yada, yada, yada. I think what they were trying to go for was this idea of a lot of serial killers do tend to be really two-faced. Say, for example, Ted Bundy. He was able to hold down multiple jobs and multiple relationships and have a family while he was committing his horrible, heinous crimes. So I think that's what they were going for. That said, it's not very well stated in the film. That's just my benefit of the doubt when it comes to Nathan as a character. You know, it's like he's just this two-faced guy who will act completely different in one scene compared to the scene right before it. And then it's never really explained, fleshed out why, but my guess would be that's just kind of what serial killers are.
So back in the plot, Roddy's dying. He loves Shiloh's mother. So he decides that he's going to leave his company to Shiloh instead of his horrible, horrible children. So he convinces Shiloh to sneak out of her house while Nathan's away on a job, and he takes her to this fair, where we are introduced to Blind Mag, an old friend of Shiloh's deceased mother, who was blind, but Roddy gave her the ability to see again, except in the fine print of the contract it says that she has to work for Roddy for the rest of her life or he'll kill her.
Yeah, and she's not given, like, normal human eyes, like what would normally be happening during a transplant. He gave her, like, these weird robotic eyes, and that's never really explained.
And they can shoot out holograms, which are cool.
Yeah. At one point, the Largo children argue about who is more deserving of their father's empire, and they're all just shitty people. They're stabbing people to death, cutting people open as they're singing, and they're the comic relief. I've always laughed at people having their throats slit open as they're begging for their lives.
Yeah.
That's only slightly a joke, because I have a fucked up sense of humor.
Shiloh ends up running away, and she's helped to escape by our friendly grave robber dude, who doesn't have a name, and is also played by the film's screenwriter.
Yes, this film was based on a stage musical called The Necromerchant's Debt. And after some rewrites to the script, they made it the title that they gave it. But yeah, this was a stage play. And the guy who wrote it and wrote a lot of the music, he plays this guy called the Grave Robber who just out of nowhere has a shit ton of white makeup on his face because, I don't know, that's cool.
And also, he's Amber's drug dealer, and they have sex. They have a very suggestive dance number where they say that they have sex off screen. Anyway, Shiloh makes it home, and Mag comes to visit her and explains, I'm your godmother who has never talked to you because your father didn't tell me you were still alive. He might be kind of abusive now that I think about it.
Yeah, maybe.
And also, Mag yells at Nathan for being a bit of a shitty dad and locking his daughter up. And then Nathan and Shiloh have a heart-to-heart where they suddenly change into punk rock outfits, which is like the only time in the musical where it goes to a fantasy sequence, which is weird. And it all ends with Nathan just smacking Shiloh and going off to work.
Yeah, he smacks her unconscious, which is hilarious to me. Yeah, she sings about how it's cool that she's 17 because, I don't know, I guess they needed a song for this, and talking about being 17 was the subject. But interesting, I don't know if you knew this, but in that scene, there's a shot that cuts to the guitarist. That guitarist is actually Joan Jett from Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. She worked with a band called the Runaways for their song Cherry Bomb. You know, the one in Guardians of the Galaxy? That scene where they're all getting ready to fight Ronan? Yeah, Joan Jett helped make that song.
I don't know the exact list. I do know there were a couple major cameos of actual musicians in this film.
Yeah. I mean, Paul Sorvino, surprisingly, like I said, I knew nothing about this movie. I started it up. One of the first shots is of a fucking Goodfellas alumni, and I'm like, what the fuck is he doing in this? And it turns out he's like actually an established opera singer. Cool. Good for him. He knows what he wants in life.
So anyway, Roddy calls Nathan in to his office because he's got a special job. Mag is quitting, which means that he needs Nathan to murder Mag and repossess her eyes. And Nathan, well, he does a few surgical murders while he's singing first, but then he quits because he doesn't want to murder Mag.
Because killing his late wife's best friend that's probably crossing the line. I mean, after all the stuff he's done, it's good to know that he has limits.
Well, does he?
No.
Considering what we find out later. But anyway, Roddy invites Shiloh to come to the opera with him so that he can use her as bait, so that Nathan will show up to save her, and then he can capture Nathan.
It's a great plan. And I love that scene because Roddy is enticing Shiloh to come to the opera so that he can give her the cure to her disease. However, it's with the stipulation that she kill the Repo Man and bring him to him. Like, what the fuck is this 17-year-old girl gonna do against this serial killer who professionally gets paid to capture people and rip out their still beating hearts?
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's not like Nathan would ever do anything to harm his daughter, but she doesn't know that.
Right.
So anyway, at the opera, Paris Hilton gives a big song, but then her face falls off because she did a bunch of plastic surgery.
Right, because the scene before that, she meets with her dad saying that the surgery she had went wrong, and he's like, no, it's not that bad. Then she shows her horrifically scarred up face, which, to be honest, I don't know if plastic surgery will do that per se. I would say that's more of a chemical burn. But, you know, I don't know what they do in the near future. But then again, he like starts gagging and is like, yeah, okay, fine, I'll give you a new surgery. And her face peels off mid-performance. So, you know, that's fun.
And also at the opera, a bunch of like extras in the crowd sing about how great Genco is because it's given them all of these awesome plastic surgeries to be hot.
Yeah, because at this point in the future, it also established that organ transplant, it's more than just like a necessary to live. It's like become the trending thing to do. You know, you do it to be cool and hot and
Can I be honest about what I kind of think is a big flaw in this film?
go right ahead.
I think it is a mistake for this film to have focused so heavily on people just getting plastic surgery so they look pretty. Like, you have this really, really good idea that is barely touched upon. Medical debt is destroying this nation. It's ruining millions of lives. And the idea of medical debt that is worse because if you miss your payments, they murder you. That would be a really interesting thing to make a film about, but instead it's, no, all these people are in debt and being killed by the Repo Man because they're just vain idiots.
Yeah, I guess it does still portray the people in charge of the debt as bad people, but still, at the end of the day, you absolutely have a point.
So anyway, Mag gives her final performance, and in the middle of it, she just says, you know what, fuck it, I don't need these eyes, and rips them out!
Yeah, and at this point, I'm thinking to myself, this is a pretty terrible show. Like, this opera, I mean, I'd be pretty horrified if I was in the audience there.
Actually, shit, let's talk about what the audience sees in this movie. And also, the audience never gets up or questions anything because, it's just a show. That dude just got murdered. He's just an actor. But, so you show up to this opera, the genetic opera. Not sure why it's called a genetic opera, because it's just a normal opera. Roddy comes in, they all sing about how awesome Roddy is. This one single mom takes her shirt off. Then Amber comes on stage, her face falls off immediately. Mag gives a performance, she rips out her eyes, Roddy murders her by dropping her on a metal fence that impales her. And then Roddy brings out Shiloh and the Repo Man, who he unmasks to reveal it's Nathan, and reveals that all along, Shiloh isn't really sick.
Oh,
like, Nathan has just been poisoning her so she can't go outside because he doesn't want to lose her like her mother. So, like, this is what the audience is seeing, by the way. And I'm gonna put a pause on commenting on how fucked up Nathan is for a sec. But then the audience sees as Roddy tells Shiloh to murder Nathan, and then she refuses, so Roddy just murders him anyway, and then Roddy dies. This is an interesting opera.
I mean, I'd pay matinee price for it, just throwing that out there, but it's like, what the fuck? I'm out of words. I honestly don't know what to say. I'm trying to think of a joke. I don't know what to say. It's just that as a concept alone is utterly hilarious.
So we briefly went over it. Roddy tries to get Shiloh to kill Nathan, and he says he'll give her his company if she does, but she refuses because even though he poisoned her for 17 years and is horrifically abusive throughout this film, she still loves him. And then Roddy just shoots Nathan anyway before randomly dying of cancer. And we get this nice song of Shiloh and Nathan hugging as he dies and them singing about how much they love each other.
Yeah.
And I feel like the film's maybe a bit gentle with Nathan.
Yeah.
I don't know if he really deserved to have a musical number about how much his daughter loves him after everything in this film, but yeah, it's sad.
And it never comes to light that Roddy is the one that really killed Marnie. So as far as anyone knows, like, Roddy sings a song early on about how he's gonna take that fact to his grave, and he does. But at the end of the day, Shiloh is holding her father in her arms as he's bleeding out from a gunshot wound that was almost shot by her, and she's staring at the man that killed her mother, has been poisoning her entire life, and is a professional serial killer ripping out human body parts from people that are still alive, and has been sheltering her and hiding this fact her entire life, and was responsible for killing the only remnant, or was almost responsible for killing the last remnant she has with her mother, that being Meg. And she's just like, yeah, no, I love you. I forgive you.
I don't really judge Shiloh, the fictitious character, because she's sheltered and he's all she knows. Like, yeah, she would probably have some degree of Stockholm Syndrome, but also just how the film is set up. Like, I don't know if it was really the right call to have Nathan be, like, redeemed by dying.
Right.
Dude's really abusive.
Mm-hmm. And he's a serial killer, so, you know.
Yeah, that too. So, you may be wondering what happens now. And the answer is, I don't fucking know. Like, that's the last we ever see Shiloh. She's 17, her parents are dead, she's never been outside except for in this film. She'll be fine.
Yeah, she sings a song about how now she's a free woman and just leaves the opera and goes wherever in the world she can go.
But we do get a short epilogue scene showing that Amber is in charge of the company now. And also, Pavi is wearing her face as a mask. And also, Luigi murdered a bunch of people who tried to buy the mask.
Honestly, I was chuckling. I was laughing at that scene. The text establishes that after Amber took over the company, she auctioned off her peeled off face, and then Luigi killed the top 3 auctioneers, and then Pavi won the face, and now he just wears his sister's face. There's probably a fetish for that somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a thing we haven't really established. There's a lot of incest jokes about the 3 of them.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, also, weird thing, Pavi has an Italian accent. Like, the family's Italian, but the other 3 don't. It's weird.
Right. I mean, I don't know. Is it more weird than Sean Connery never hiding his Scottish accent ever?
I mean, no, because you can just assume, oh, I guess James Bond is from Scotland.
Well, he also did Highlander, where he plays a guy from Spain.
What?
And then he did The Untouchables, where he plays a cop from Chicago.
Okay, I take it back. That is weird.
I mean, I honestly think James Bond was the only one where he actually legitimately tried to hide his Scottish accent.
And you may notice that we've gotten to the ending of this film a bit quicker than normal, because there isn't really a lot that happens in this film. A big problem in this film is that so many of the scenes are longer than they need to be in just these drawn-out musical numbers.
Yeah, and like a significant portion of the scenes are just repeated information.
And we haven't really touched upon it yet, but this film is a musical. Shit, it's an opera. Every single line of dialogue is sung. The entire thing is a musical number, and part of it is just me not being a fan of the style of music, but I don't think this film has that great of a soundtrack.
No, not really. Like I said, I was listening to it earlier, but no, I'm not the biggest fan of the song. The only song I really like is Infected, that one where Shiloh sings, "Why are my genetics such a bitch?" I wrote that line down specifically. I'm like, that's so good.
Like, the Grave Robbers song As He's Getting Drugs is good. That one's good. As Nathan's Dying is good. Nathan's song about how he's a legal assassin is kind of good. You notice that in this film that has 56 different songs, that I'm struggling to name good ones. That's not good.
Especially in comparison to Little Shop of Horrors. Like, I've actually become a pretty big fan of the music in that. That was pretty good. Particularly the dentist song. I love that. I've rewatched that scene multiple times. It's so funny.
Overall, just most of the music in this opera, in my opinion, is really bland and just kind of blurs together, which is this film's greatest problem. It's a musical without good music.
Similar to that, there's also, despite the fact that this film had a very low budget of $8.5 million, which is very low for a movie. It's a lot of money, but it's very low for a movie, most of which was funded by Paris Hilton. There's also a lot of CGI in this film, especially sweeping shots of the entire city, and it looks Spy Kids level. Which makes sense because it has a Spy Kids alumni, part of the cast. And the movie just visually looks like shit. And again, that's probably what they were going for, because it's this grungy...
It's a stylistic thing. Everything is dark and through a blue filter, which, it's a stylistic choice, so it's not as bad as in other films, but also, it just causes a lot of scenes to be really grungy and colorless.
There's a lot of violence in this movie, and to that extent, that was entertaining. I think that if you're a fan of like Hellraiser and the other works of Clive Barker, I think you're definitely going to get a kick out of this. Just the sheer like imagery of Satanism and hell and really fucked up visceral deaths. I think you're going to enjoy this, but if that's not for you, then don't watch this movie.
This is a very stylistic movie. It's clear this is a movie where the people making it knew what they wanted to make, and they created their vision perfectly. I just don't know if it's the type of film that's really something I enjoy.
I mean, I had some fun with it, but at the end of the day, I really don't know if I'm ever going to watch it again. Because, like I said, the writing was shit, the editing was even worse. The movie visually looks very ugly and cheap, which again isn't necessarily their fault. You work with the budget you have, but still doesn't look good. A lot of this I feel like they bit off a bit more than they could chew. Even with a cast as quote unquote stacked as Paris Hilton and Alexa Vega. No disrespect to Alexa Vega. All offense to Paris Hilton, you know?
I do appreciate this film. I have a lot of respect for it. I appreciate how unique and different it is. Honestly, the story, there's a lot that could have been better explored, a lot of ideas that just don't pan out well, but there are good ideas behind it. I like this twisted family drama, and I like the dystopian elements. I just don't know if they're executed as well as they could be.
Right, absolutely. And I think the reason why a lot of the more interesting elements weren't as well explored is because this film was the first in an anticipated trilogy in this series. So they were going to make 2 more sequels, but this movie failed at the box office, and they obviously did not do that.
Maybe it's something we need to watch. I know a lot of what they had planned was reworked into Devil's Carnival, but I haven't seen that.
I'd be interested in checking that out. But added to the fact that I don't know if this is true or what, because I looked it up on Google and it said that the runtime was 2.5 hours. And I said, go fuck yourself. I'm not watching that. I'm a defender of long movies, but I'm not watching 2.5 hours of this. And even on IMDb, it says the original cut of this film was 2.5 hours. But then the cut that was released theatrically and the cut we watched was like a little over 1.5 hours.
Yeah, I could not find this 2.5 hour cut you've talked about. I know that there were like 10 different cut songs, so maybe that's where the extra length came from, but I don't know how this could have had an extra hour of screen time. Especially considering that the budget was limited to the point where parts of the film are just comics.
I don't know, maybe there was a version of this that had like 1 or maybe even multiple different subplots into it that made this movie an A+ masterpiece, or maybe not, I don't know, that they just got cut. Point is, they were planning, at one point I heard, I don't know if this is true, there was an hour longer version of this, and they were planning on making a trilogy out of this. So there was just a lot that I imagine ended up on the cutting room floor.
Also, something weird, there is a film that came out 2 years after this that has the same concept, like repossessing internal organs, and almost the same title. It's called Repo Men. It stars Jude Law and Forrest Whitaker. I haven't seen that, but hey, there's this concept, but less stylized. Maybe it's good.
And starring Jude Law.
Not judging from everything I've seen about the reviews on it, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, what else can we really say about this? This is an acid trip. Like, here's how I would describe. It's like if you take that other Repo Man movie, granted I haven't seen it, that other Repo Man movie with Jude Law, you take a bunch of acid, you put on a shit ton of rock music, watch that movie, and that's probably what you're gonna get out of this.
Ultimately, this is a film that deserves a cult classic status.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think it's good, but it's got style. It's something I'm at least gonna remember. And for that, it could be a lot worse. I guess this is the point of the show where we give numbers on how bad it actually is. Riley, I'm curious about what you're going to do.
Honestly, I did have a lot of fun watching it, but at the end of the day, I just think all the bad elements to it far exceed the good elements. Like we talked about, the writing, the editing, the cinematography, the CGI are all really bad. And the songs, like you said, aren't really that great, like that memorable. I probably am only going to remember the one song, and that was because of a really stupid, shitty line. I don't know. Like, I like you said, I completely agree with the fact that this should, and I completely understand why it is a cult classic, but I don't know. This is not a good movie, so I'm probably going to give it a 4 out of 10. It's enjoyable to watch, but I'm probably, apart from the style of it, I'm probably not going to remember it.
It's such a big swing and a miss, and I always prefer films that aim high and come up short than just ones that don't try and come up short, but God, it comes up so short.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a blast.
I don't want to give it so low of a score, but yeah, it's like a 7 out of 10 for me. I wish it was a better film. It had the potential to be a really good movie. It just comes up a little short.
Right. I mean, like I said, I had a blast watching it, but at the end of the day, there's really not much I enjoyed about it besides the shock of watching it for the first time. And again, if you're a fan of Clive Barker-esque storytelling and his works and stuff like that, I think you're definitely gonna get a lot more out of it. I mean, I'm a big fan of Clive Barker. Then again, I am a big fan of Hellraiser and Clive Barker, and I wasn't a big fan of it. But I don't know. I think you're gonna find a lot of enjoyment if you're into that really dark, fucked up type of horror, dark comedy type things, you know?
This isn't a good movie, but it's definitely a movie you should check out.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way of putting it.
Which is, I don't know if that's what we can say about next week's movie, which, well, we've talked about this series a lot in the past. It's a third entry into this. The one that halfway through development switched directors to a director who, I mean, is better, but also he's a giant fucking asshole. We are, of course, talking about Justice League, the theatrical cut. We will do the Snyder cut, but like a few weeks after we do the theatrical cut.
Next week, we're going to be talking about the movie that was so bad, and fans hated it so much, that DC and Warner Brothers finally gave Zack Snyder the chance to make his movie and release the Snyder cut straight to HBO Max, and then fired him anyway, because fuck it.
Yeah, and as we all know, the Snyder cut was a masterpiece that proved all of those fans right. It perfectly captured on the quality, the phenomenal filmmaking of Man of Steel and Batman v Superman that this terrible, terrible film could not live up to.
We're only being half sarcastic there, kind of, in a weird way. Anyway, stay tuned to next week.
I mean, it's a bad movie because they changed directors halfway through, but it wouldn't have been good if they didn't change directors.
Yeah, I mean, judging by the...
Well, we'll go over this next week, okay? We're watching Justice League 2017.
You can find our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube, and anywhere else you find your podcasts. You can find me at Riley Thorpe on YouTube, where you can check out all my short films. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Riley James Thorpe, where I post a lot of content. And you can find the show on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter at Silver Age Silver Screen, where we post updates to the show and a lot of bonus content there.
You can find me on Twitter at JarmesCasey, JarmesCasey. You can find all the things I write at CaseyJarms.wordpress.com. Also, look up The Politics of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It's a 3-part video essay I made.
Definitely check it out.
Anyway, we'll be back next week, assuming our dads don't secretly poison us for our entire lives because they don't want us to go outside. Hey, wasn't there like a Hulu movie with that concept I saw?
Yeah, it was called Run. It had Sarah Paulson in it. I heard it was great.
Yeah, maybe I'll watch that tonight. Who knows? Anyway, as always, I'm Casey Jarms.
And I'm Riley Thorpe.
And hey, it's just a movie. Don't lose your head about it. Especially not to a ladder.